You're watching Voices in Mystery. I'm your host, Nancy Carlson. Our next guest is author Albert Bell, who's been on our program before. Welcome back to Voices in Mystery.
Thank you, Nancy. Pleasure
You have a new book to talk about.
Yes, I do.
The Secret of the Bradford House, is
That's
that
right,
correct?
yeah.
What's the Bradford House?
The Bradford House is an old house in a neighborhood where two children live who've been in a previous book of mine. It's being made into a bed and breakfast, and suddenly some strange things start happening. So the two kids, Steve and Kendra, of course, have to find out why this odd stuff is going on.
They suspect ghosts, or?
They don't, but there's a new girl whose family has just moved into the neighborhood, Rachel Mendoza, and she and her aunt bring up the idea that there might be a ghost in this place. They think they've seen something.
What is the setting for your series?
It's set in southwestern Kentucky, near what's called the land between the lakes. Lake Barkley is the main area. And the first book that I wrote about these two kids, called The Secret of the Lonely Grave, was also set in the same area. My wife's family used to have a houseboat on Lake Barkley, so I got interested in the area while we were down there.
So you know that area.
Yes, yes.
So you're from Holland, Michigan?
I've lived there for over 30 years. I was born in South Carolina and grew up in various places in the South, but Holland has been home for quite a long time now.
And you teach at Hope College?
Yes.
What is your area of teaching?
I'm in the history department, and I teach especially ancient history, the ancient Romans and Greeks.
Has that worked its way into your books?
It has, both fiction and nonfiction. I have done a book about the New Testament background, social, political background, and I also have two novels out. The first one was called All Roads Lead to Murder, and the second one is The Blood of Caesar. They feature Pliny the Younger, who actually is a real historical person, but I've turned him into an amateur detective, basically.
Has all that is ever to be found about what Pliny has written or done already exist, or are there still first sources that can be mined for information on Pliny?
We have a collection of letters of his, over 240 letters, so anytime I want to know how Pliny thinks or how he speaks, I can go back and look at those letters. We also have a long speech that he made, but throughout his letters he refers to other things that he's written, and it's a shame that we don't have them, but they just haven't been preserved over time.
Were they written on parchment?
Papyrus would have been the preferred material at that time. Parchment comes to be used a couple hundred years later, but papyrus, just the reed material that was made into sheets of writing paper, we would call it, was what they were preserved on.
What century did Pliny live in?
He lives in the late 1st century into the early 2nd century A.D. He was an eyewitness to the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 and has a rather scientific, skeptical sort of mind, which I thought would make a good attitude for a detective.
Your book on the New Testament, what did you study there?
I'm a seminary graduate. At one time thought about becoming a minister, but decided I'd rather teach than preach, although I guess I do a lot of preaching when I teach too. But I've always been interested in the context of a written document. You can't really understand what a written document is all about unless you know the context. And so what I try to do in this book is to give people enough historical and literary background that they can look at the New Testament and see how it fits into the context of the times.
And that the Jewish tribe were so anxious for Jesus in this case to they thought they'd overthrow the Romans. Is that what they were hoping?
That was one hope that they had. One thing we have to remember about the New Testament, though, is that it's more written for Greeks than it was for Jews. Paul, of course, was Jewish, but he was a Hellenistic Jew. He was a Greek, and most of the audience of the New Testament is actually Greeks. And so I think it helps to understand not just the Jewish attitudes of that time, but what does it mean for a Greek or a Roman to have dinner, or what kind of clothes do they wear? Things of that sort really play into the background.
And will you write other fiction books based on that era?
My first novel, which is I think it's still available on Amazon. Stuff lives forever on Amazon. But my first novel was set in that era. It's called The Daughter of Lazarus, and has of course a lot of overtones from the New Testament. I may go back to that, but my publisher really wants me to do more with the Pliny series that I've got developing now. So that's where my focus has to be.
How many books are in the series in Kentucky? 3?
No, the two. The second one just came out.
Okay.
I have an idea for a third one, but you know, I've got a day job and I've got a lot of other things to do as well.
Are you able to? I mean, are you able to erase the lines between day job and writing time? I mean, after all, students write to you on email at 10 at night, so you know you're working then. Yeah. How do you mix that all up?
I'm able to schedule my classes. I'd actually do most of my teaching at night, and then I need big blocks of time when I write. So I do more of my writing during the day, and my schoolwork and stuff tends to get done at night. You know, as long as I have classes prepared and papers graded, my college is not one of these that says, you know, you got to punch the clock and you got to do this and that, as long as the work gets done.
You're probably a long tenured professor, but for a young writer, would the books that you write in fiction count towards promotion and tenure?
That would depend a lot on where you were. I mean, if you were at a big research university, no, it would not. You would be regarded as wasting your time. Really? But I think the college where I teach recognizes that, you know, there's a lot of historical research that goes into the kind of writing that I do, and that actually comes out in my teaching. There are times when I go into class and it's sort of, you know, I want to show you what I've just learned while I was, you know, writing researching to write this novel. So there's a real strong crossover between my writing and my teaching.
And you don't have to hide it in any way, the way
No.
Carolyn Heilbrunn, I think, had to hide it when she was at...
Eric Siegel wrote Love Story and got fired from Yale. So it's dangerous at big places like that.
Yes, and maybe they too are changing as the lines get smudged, I think.
I get notes of congratulations from the college president, so things seem to be going okay.
Do you get stopped and asked for autographs or anything like that?
No.
You're still an anonymous. Albert Bell on a book isn't something that people
yeah, I did have had the experience about a week and a half ago. A former student of mine came back, and he was at seminary in Dallas, and he said his professor had shown the class some books that they ought to have and to read. And lo and behold, you know, there was my New Testament book, and he looked at it, wait, I know that guy.
Now, you've written about the Dutch in one of your books, haven't you?
Yes.
Is that connected to Holland, Michigan?
Holland was founded by a group of Dutch immigrants in 1847. They're one minority among others right now, but it's still a pretty strong, I mean, the place has a festival called Tulip Time. You got to know they're Dutch. So I was able to write a mystery novel. It's called Death Goes Dutch, but I think it shows what's happening in West Michigan, because the main character is a Korean-American adoptee. So she's Korean, but her name is Sarah DeGraff. Oh. And that happens a lot. You have people who have these Dutch names, but when you meet them, they're adoptees from other places, or they're the children of a marriage between a Dutch and a Korean or a Hispanic person or something.
And the Dutch Reformed Church, is that still in?
They call it the Reformed Church in America now.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. But that isn't the church you went to seminary for?
No. Yeah. I went to a Baptist seminary.
Seminary. Well, we're glad that you've been with us today. We want to talk about your books again. We have The Secret of the Bradford House is the newest book out, and what people should be looking for on the shelf, set in Kentucky. And I'd like to thank you so much for coming on Voices in Mystery today.
My pleasure.
We've been talking to Albert Bell, and stay tuned for another program of Voices in Mystery. I'm your host, Nancy Carlson.